I recall the spring of 1886 vividly. My rooms on Berggasse were newly opened to patients of the nervous type, women and men alike, afflicted with invisible sufferings. Mathilde Schleicher entered my practice at 28, a musician by calling, her hands trembling as she described her migraines and sleeplessness. She spoke softly, yet there was an intensity about her, a gaze fixed somewhere beyond the present moment. She told me she had been abandoned by her fiancé, and since that betrayal, her mind had descended into what she called a dark corridor. It was depression, profound and unyielding, yet I suspected there were hidden forces beneath her sorrow. In those early days, my instrument of investigation was hypnosis. I placed her in the reclining chair, drew the curtains, and guided her into trance. Under suggestion, fragments emerged, memories of loss, of humiliation, of desire turned inward upon itself. When she awoke, she would sometimes weep with relief, claiming the pressure in her head had lifted. By 1889, her mood had lightened. She presented me with a gift, a textbook inscribed with gratitude. I accepted it with cautious optimism. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps the mind, when coaxed gently into introspection, could heal itself. But gratitude is often the calm before another storm. Within a month, Mathilde returned, her demeanor transformed. She spoke rapidly, eyes burning with conviction. "I shall be famous, doctor," she said. "My music will change Vienna." The sadness had vanished, replaced by a restless energy that refused rest. She could not sleep. She laughed at odd hours, and during trance she thrashed violently. I realized then that her malady was not mere melancholia. It oscillated between the poles of exaltation and despair. Today one might name it manic depressive illness. In my day, we groped for terms in the dark. My own uncertainty pressed upon me, for I had neither precedent nor colleague to guide me in this terrain. In her manic state, Mathilde began to conflate affection with devotion. She sent me letters filled with endearments. During one session, she attempted to clasp my hand to her breast. It disturbed me, not for moral reasons alone, but because I recognized in her behavior the phenomenon of transference, the displacement of emotion from one figure to another. The patient, I realized, loves not the doctor, but the image of authority he represents. Still, I could not treat her at home. Her outbursts grew uncontrollable. I referred her to Dr. Wilhelm Svetlin's private clinic, a reputable establishment for nervous disorders. My notes record that I feared for her safety. In those halls, her mania deepened. She sang through the night, stripped off her garments, and called out my name as if I were both tormentor and savior. The physicians there labeled her a nymphomaniac, a term reflecting the moral sensibilities of our age more than medical precision. Yet beneath her frenzied gestures lay the tragedy of a mind split between repression and eruption. She was medicated heavily: opium, morphine, chloral hydrate, remedies of their time. Each visit I made to the clinic left me conflicted. Her face, once luminous with musicality, now bore the pallor of narcotic sleep. When she spoke, it was of birth and children. She hid her excretions under her pillow, whispering that they were infants she must protect. I began to see in her delusions the grotesque reflection of a wish, maternal, denied, and inverted by illness. In private, I asked myself whether suggestion had opened gates I could not close. Had my methods stirred the unconscious too abruptly, without the structure that analysis would later provide? Mathilde's suffering haunted my early theoretical writings. She was not merely a patient, but a mirror in which I glimpsed my own limitations as a physician of the soul. By the winter of 1889, I received letters from Dr. Svetlin describing Mathilde's state as improved, though I doubted such optimism. The sedatives dulled her movements, her speech slowed, and the vivacity that once defined her was buried beneath chemical quiet. Opium, morphine, chloral hydrate, even tinctures of cannabis, these were the tools of our era. We believed rest and suppression would restore the mind. I now see that what we achieved was obedience, not recovery. Her music, the very essence of her identity, fell silent. I visited her twice during those months. The first time, she was lucid for a brief moment. She recognized me and whispered, "You freed me, but now I sleep inside my own head." Then she drifted back into stupor. I felt the weight of those words as a condemnation of my own ignorance. By early 1890, her mania had indeed subsided, though only through exhaustion. The attending physicians congratulated themselves on a cure. Yet the cost was evident. Her hands trembled, her liver swollen, her eyes jaundiced. Still, she insisted she felt calm at last. She was released in May. I resumed her care, prescribing chloral hydrate for sleep and a new sedative compound, sulfonal heralded in the medical journals as both modern and safe. I trusted the literature. I wanted to believe in progress. But faith in novelty is a dangerous narcotic. By September, she returned complaining of fatigue. I recall her pale complexion, the slight trembling of her lips as she attempted a smile. She thanked me still, though I sensed the strain beneath her courtesy. A few days later, news arrived. Mathilde Schleicher was dead. Her urine, I later learned, had turned red with blood. Clear evidence of poisoning, the liver destroyed by the very sedatives meant to calm her. The irony was unbearable. I had sought to ease her suffering, yet in doing so, I had abetted her death. I wrote in my notes only one line: "The physician's duty ends not at treatment, but at understanding." That understanding, however, would take years to mature. Mathilde's case revealed that symptom suppression could not touch the hidden psychic conflict. Drugs dulled the cries of the unconscious, but never silenced them. In her, I glimpsed the necessity of a new approach, not hypnosis, not narcotics, but dialogue. The talking cure, as it would come to be called, began with my acknowledgement of failure. Every insight I later achieved owed something to that woman whose name history almost forgot. At times I still hear her voice in memory, soft, musical, then rising into laughter. I imagine she wished only to be heard, not medicated into silence. Perhaps all neurosis is a kind of music we have forgotten how to listen to. In Mathilde's condition, I perceived the struggle between repression and expression, the psyche torn between forbidden desire and moral constraint. Her mania embodied the return of the repressed, the unconscious breaking through the fragile barrier of consciousness. From a modern perspective, her case demonstrates early bipolar disorder complicated by over-medication and lack of monitoring. Yet through her suffering, my understanding evolved. Hysteria, depression, mania, all spoke the same language of hidden emotion. Mathilde's tragedy became the soil from which psychoanalysis would grow. In the months following her death, I found myself unable to take new patients for several weeks. Each time I heard the faint strains of piano music from a nearby cafe, it struck me like an echo from a dream. The unconscious, I began to see, was not a poetic metaphor, but a concrete force, one that could kill as surely as any poison if ignored. I returned to my notes on hysteria and transference, determined to understand why suggestion had failed. Hypnosis had allowed me to unearth buried memories, yes, but it offered no lasting resolution. The symptom would vanish for a time, only to return in altered form. True cure, I suspected, required the patient's conscious participation, a dialogue, not a trance. It was Mathilde's voice, I imagined, when I first began the method of free association. Speak whatever comes to mind, I would instruct future patients, believing that within their speech lay the path to healing. The unconscious, once given language, could be negotiated with. Her silence had taught me that repression thrives in isolation. Still, I remain uneasy when reflecting upon her. She was, in a sense, a casualty of discovery, a life consumed in the infancy of a science. One cannot atone for such loss, but one may bear witness. Each theory I constructed thereafter, from the Oedipus complex to the analysis of dreams, carried a trace of her story within it. Some nights I dream of a piano in a quiet salon. The keys depress themselves, soundless, as if the music exists only within my mind. I wake with the certainty that Mathilde's melody was not extinguished, but absorbed, transformed into the vocabulary of a new understanding of human sorrow. If I speak of her now, it is not to immortalize failure, but to acknowledge its necessity. Science advances not through triumph, but through remorse. Mathilde Schleicher's suffering taught me the humility required to listen, not merely to observe. Without her, I might have remained a hypnotist of symptoms, not a listener of souls. 45. To those who inherit my discipline, remember, the unconscious is not a monster to be subdued, but a language to be translated. And behind each case file lies a human being whose torment once begged for understanding. Thus ends my recollection of that first patient. I dedicate it to the memory of all who have suffered unseen, and to the fragile art of making the unseen speak.